Hi, and welcome everyone to the Time Lord Talk. This is an AMA with Justin England and Arvid Norberg. I'm your host, Brandt. You also know me by Clyde Wallace from the DevRel team and also the support team. If you're not familiar with Justin and Arvid, let me tell you just a little bit about them. Justin is CNI's VP of Development, Operations, and Security, and Arvid is one of our senior software engineers. Both of them are deeply involved with the Time Lord project. And as you know, Justin has been teasing things throughout the project itself and are here to answer your questions about the application process, the Time Lords themselves, and other questions that kind of revolve around this realm. Before we get started, here's a quick tip for asking your questions. We do have a Q&A section inside of Discord. Feel free to utilize that thread to ask questions. I'll be reading those off. In addition, we have a Q&A section directly in Zoom. Please make sure that you post your questions directly in there, and we'll go ahead and take a look at them at that time. Enough being said, I'm going to start with some of the questions that we had gotten in Discord. Once Justin gives us a nice quick rundown of the Time Lords themselves. So to kick it off here, Justin, if you don't mind just answering kind of what a Time Lord is, what it does, how that compares to the ASIC Time Lords we're coming out with, and what this really means for the network as a whole.
Absolutely. Well, I'll start backwards with you, though. The ASIC Time Lord is not in what a lot of people would think of as an ASIC, like a proof of work ASIC doing SHA-256 hashes. What the ASICs are is just a really fast version of what a Time Lord is, and I will explain that in a moment. But these are basically the world's fastest VDF math computer that exists. Currently, say you're running a current fast Time Lord that isn't an ASIC generation Time Lord, you would probably be running something with AVX 512, signature sets on it on your chip, and that's the second fastest way to run a Time Lord that exists. The iterations per second there were about 260,000. The ASIC Time Lords are running just north of 950,000, and that's iterations per second. So that's how fast you can do a VDF proof. So it's pretty large increase in speed for VDF math. The ASIC Timelords themselves attach as a accessory unit to a host computer that would be running the Chia node software and an interface layer that communicates and passes the proofs that you're doing for proofs of space and time to this VDF that does them very quickly and then passes back to the host CPU to finish the partials and ship them out to the network. And so that's one of the ways the Time Lord is actually obfuscated. It looks just like a node on the network. There's just a Time Lord talking to that node doing really fast VDF proofs. It's also running the Time Lord software, but that's not broadcast anywhere. What the Time Lords do is they are essentially a time clock on the network. The Time Lord generates the proofs that need to be, that you need to use a proof of space to win a block with, and they also infuse the blocks onto the network. They select a winner via some really complicated math that essentially if your proof is closest to 1, you are the winner within a certain amount of time that has been given for each iteration for a given proof on the network. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's kind of like the 30,000-foot layperson's view of what a Time Lord does. There are some deeper caveats. If you read the Time Lord documentation on our website, there are some things that I'm kind of glazing over there. If anybody has specific questions about that at the end, we can cover that stuff. I just didn't want to dive too deep into the weeds as a preamble.
Hey, thank you very much, Justin. I think that was a great overview. And as Justin mentioned, if anybody has follow-up questions regarding that, please do use the Q&A or the Discord thread in order to provide us those questions. And going to Discord now, we had a couple of questions asked by iSky. The first one being, what are minimal or optimal hardware to run the actual Time Lord? And then what is most important, speed or latency for internet connection, or both? Essentially, what are the minimum requirements?
Absolutely. So there are no minimum requirements. I would say that any modern-ish gaming PC will be able to run as a Time Lord. You will need to run Linux as an operating system. That's maybe one wrinkle for people. But as far as the hardware profile, I mean, we're running on current gen Intels for the 3 clusters we're running. To run as the absolute fastest Time Lord, you're going to need at least that plus an ASIC. So that's mid-spec for fastest candidate. But as a backup or as a helping the network out kind of candidate as a Time Lord, anything reasonably modern. If you're in the high 800, high 700 IPS range, you're not quite at a million. That's still a much better backup than something that's running at 240K IPS. And so, obviously faster is better, but there's no minimum requirement. Obviously, it's probably not going to run on like a compact 186 or whatever. But so speed and latency are going to be important. I mean, most modern broadband has enough speed to run a Time Lord. There's no like the peer-to-peer protocol that has no like strict requirements on like super fast or super high bandwidth connections. Latency is going to be pretty important because you're going to be being gossip solutions from peers in the network, and we'll need to hear them reasonably quickly in order to be the fastest Time Lord. Otherwise, another Time Lord will have heard it and chewed through the proof and infused the block already. So I would say latency is the most important. Being close to peering connections, that sort of thing is going to really help. But honestly, the biggest thing is being closest to the peer gossiping the winning solution. If you are at the peer gossiping the winning solution, your timer is likely going to be the one that infuses the block. So that's kind of the bigger thing than any specific implementation question.
Thank you very much. I think that was a great answer and definitely touched on all the parts. I think it was great to throw in that note about the peer connections and the proximity to them as well. The next question that we have in Discord is regarding the secondary sales, if you will, and also how many of these gadgets are going to be sold overall. So the question is, how many are going to be sold? And then we had a follow-up question from iSky previously that I'm adding in here as to once they're sold initially, what are the regulations and rules about resales?
Absolutely. So we're going to be letting about 100 go. It's going to depend on our final QA in January. We're just going to validate the ones that have been in storage for a little bit, still operate, turn on power on, all that kind of stuff. There's going to be a contract you'll have to sign that will give us right of first refusal on a sale. We can cover if you are selected, we're happy to sit down with you and our legal team and go through kind of what the agreement you're agreeing to is. But the long and short of it would be we would prefer that you don't resell these on the secondary market. You sell them back to us at cost so we can give them to somebody else who's going to contribute to the network. Happy to buy them back from you if you're unsatisfied with running a Time Lord. What we want to avoid is FOMO reselling of the Time Lords and markup to like thousands and thousands of dollars a price and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and definitely understandable with all the other issues that might arise during resales there as well. Another question we have from HDD in Discord, which I know you had already answered in Discord, but just to reiterate on here, are you keeping track of the highest silicone lottery batches as a failsafe if a bad actor did acquire a few? Or do you have a faster ASIC in the works for a plan B never to be released?
Yeah, so we benched every one that exists. There are roughly 150 in existence. I don't know. I think this is a testament to how good our chip manufacturer is, but there's very little difference between the very best one and the very worst one. Less than a few percent speed difference. I'm not super worried about retaining the best ones. They're all pretty much analogous. I am not worried about a malactor getting a hold of these and doing things to speed these up maliciously to try to become a malicious fast Time Lord. One, it's hard to be malicious fast Time Lord and the fast Time Lord, right? Like if you're making weaker weight chains, if you're playing games and reorgs and stuff like that, you're not going to be fast enough that the other Time Lords aren't going to catch you out and make a longer, heavier true chain eventually. They also we got lucky. Some of the performance characteristics on these things, they don't run super well cold. You got to let them warm up a little bit before they can run up to close to 1 million IPS, which is useful so that liquid nitrogen cooling or something like that doesn't really give you an advantage. Although if that is the game people would really want to play, I certainly would like to liquid nitrogen cool something someday. So that would be fun. But suffice it to say, if there is something a malactor can do, we've tested it. and are willing to do that as well if we need to make sure that there's honest Time Lords out there. And then obviously, we would broadcast like, hey, this is what the pattern we're using to run the fastest Time Lord. If anybody else wants to be insane and invest in name X technology to cool it or speed it up or whatever. We don't see a lot of those opportunities, but certainly we're going to stay on top of that. And any meaningful change we'll be willing to invest in to ensure that the fast Time Lords are honest.
Excellent, and always great to hear that we at CNI are keeping an eye open for those edge cases and what else might occur with them. Now, I think this leads perfectly into the next question, and this is also from Discord, from Wolf. Why aren't Time Lords incentivized?
Yeah, so I mean, do you want to cover this one, Arvid? I've been talking a lot.
Right, yeah, sure. Fundamentally, my view of this is you don't want the network to turn into a proof of work, essentially. So you don't want sort of a significant gain in sort of chances of winning blocks by having a faster Time Lord. Certainly not now. Like the amount of work you're going to need to be putting into speeding, like getting his faster Time Lord, is going to be a lot of work and a very small chance of getting an advantage from that, basically. Maybe you can add some more nuance to that, Justin.
Yeah. To kind of summarize what Arvin was saying is that if Time Lords were incentivized because they are doing essentially BDF grinding, that would be proof of work, which is not the intention of the network. We view that the one proof of work-ish component should be an altruistic one. Someone's got to do the hard crypto math and like actually prove the proof. We prefer a limited number of units be doing that and not be paid for it, because if you pay for it, then it's a proof of work chain, and there are we see the issues with scaling those in a way that is both green and kind of along with kind of the ideals that Chia was kind of founded with.
Absolutely, and definitely plays a role against that centralization versus decentralization effect there if we were to start awarding for these Time Lords. And that's all the questions that we had in Discord. I've not yet seen anything come through Zoom. So if anybody in the audience does have another question, feel free to post it in Discord or post it with the Q&A in Zoom.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is for Arvid. Can you dive deeper into the selection of the winning proof portion that I kind of glazed over earlier? Can you talk about the math that we're doing, how we select winners, how many winners there can be, that sort of thing?
I can give it a try. Like I'm not actually an expert on the actual math, but fundamentally, the proof of space that you like, how well your plot sort of matches the challenge, every plot is going to be different. So from matching a challenge to a plot, you essentially get a quality. So every potential winning block will have different quality, and we pick the one with the highest quality, basically the plot that had the best match with the challenge.
Can two plots have an equally best match to a given challenge?
Only if it's the same plot, basically. If you're running two farmers and you say you farm over like a network drive and they both share the same plot.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very informative. And during that time, we did have a question up here. It looks like Justin would like to answer it. It is, do we need a separate full node for each Time Lord in a 3 Time Lord cluster?
Yes. We are running 3 individual current gen Intel nodes for each of our Time Lord clusters that are globally distributed. So that's 3 gaming rigs, essentially, each with an ASIC attached, and they run in a symbiote mode. Basically, you have 1 main node and then 2 nodes that are basically just being passed with partials. You can compete. So the speed difference between a 3 node cluster and a single Time Lord ASIC running with a single host machine, the 3 node cluster is almost always going to be fastest, unless via some network, tomfoolery or just latency, a more close single ASIC gets it sooner, then it could possibly be the winner. So you're not never going to be the lead Time Lord, but the odds are pretty low that you'll be a cluster, given all things being equal and same distance to appear and all that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you. And we do have another question in Discord. If all of the ASIC Timelords are not sold, will CNI bring some or all of the remainders online around the world?
Certainly. Right now our plan is to run 4 clusters distributed globally. Basically 2 on the North American continent, 1 in Asia, 1 in Europe. We could bring more online globally, right? Like the limiting factor, honestly, is the logistics one. I joked about putting together a conference talk about this, but I just coordinated a project on, 19 different time zones across 3 continents, installing 3 clusters. The 4th one was really close to get to and easier to get to, but 3 of them were kind of a pain to get all the hardware to and all that kind of stuff. So like that's the limiting factor, is getting the hosts, getting them shipped, getting them through VAT or import tax or whatever, getting them installed, getting people there to run through the initial install. If we could train remote hands people to do it, that kind of makes scaling it easier. Certainly it's something we would explore, but it's not, it would not be like a simple lift. So I don't want to, misrepresent what our priorities would be. It would probably be a slow follow on if that is something we did do.
Absolutely. And great to see that we have an action plan for bringing those into the market, even if the community is not able to do so. Now, that wraps up the questions that we have in Discord. I'm going to make another call here. If anybody does have a follow-up question, feel free to post it in Zoom or in that Discord thread. In the meantime, Justin, I think something that is in the back of everybody's heads, or even Arvid, is the discussion that was on Twitter not too long ago between Gene and one of the members of CAS about potential attacks to the Chia network if you do have a faster Time Lord and can remove foliage blocks. So summarization, the attack was essentially creating the fastest Time Lord, removing foliage blocks, so essentially making it so nobody is having their transactions pass through.
I will say that is not how it would work. I mean, you theoretically could, as I alluded to, be a malicious Time Lord and be quick. You are not creating the true heaviest chain. And because foliage is not part of the weight, if you did limit the foliage would be gossiped by other peers. So like other peers know what the good block is that was gossiped to you. You're not, unless you somehow created a winning block in a vacuum, and then we're able to somehow trick everybody else into accepting it. Someone else knows what the good block was before you doctored it. And so there's, the chain would rectify itself.
Yeah, thank you both. Absolutely. So while we give it a couple more minutes here to see if other questions arise, I have a question for both of you. And it's, now that we are launching the ASIC Timelords and we have this big potential security gap kind of behind us, what are your thoughts on that launch as to the integration of ASICs, as well as what are the next steps for helping to embolden or create resiliency within the network?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think this went gangbusters. Like it met or exceeded my wildest expectations. Anytime you're doing stuff on different continents and different time zones, it's going to be rough to land all the details. I think the details landed admirably well here. And testament to the team here. The software we had was great. The hardware, the new ASICs are amazing. Our partners there were amazing. And then, obviously our engineering team, putting together such stable, reliable software that we can just spin it up in random data centers around the planet with no sleep. And it just runs and goes, right? So yeah, I think this has been a really great experience for us, like building muscles around things that we had never done before, kind of scaling out truly globally. And as far as making the network more resilient, I think that's like adoption, right? Like we're looking at high fee use cases, financial institutions, carbon institutions, those kind of large megacorps that are traditionally brick and mortar, moving some of that activity on chain. I think that kind of stuff is what secures the longevity of the chain past the emissions schedule when it kind of gets dips low towards the the long tail. And so I think that's where our eyes are now. And then adoption of like new security patterns, right? Like we're looking at SecP, we're looking at some business logic security patterns for managing things like security, managing things like like, I don't know, IM updates and that sort of stuff with kind of around chain utilities. Maybe not necessarily every update is on chain, but a summation of the day's updates on chain, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of really strong opportunities here to leverage our own technology and secure the blockchain and the company, but also kind of drive adoption of better security practices just in general, which I think benefits everybody. Kind of a rising tide, brings up all ships kind of thing.
So maybe you can correct me, Justin, but my understanding is that the ASIC Timelord project is primarily a way for us to hedge against some malicious actor like doing it, like beating us to it, right?
Yes.
Now that it's done, it's very unlikely that anyone else is going to do it's like a significant threat job. Still good. I wouldn't really call it that it was a security issue before, but now we're on solid ground. So things like near me that I'm working on or concerned about a lot regarding resiliency to the network is really around boosting our testing of our code and our implementation, but also improving performance to shorten latency of block propagation. Because I think that's it. I feel a little bit uneasy about sometimes, every node has to validate a block right before you propagate it. So the longer it takes to propagate a block, the longer total propagation time you'll have to disseminate in the network. So those are the kinds of things that I'm working on and interested in.
Hey, this is Earl. Thanks. Well, I just wanted to jump in because there was the question about Foliage and Timelords, and I actually did a fair amount of looking into that, so I can answer that question quite fully if you want to know. So if you had a malicious Timelord, that Timelord, well, you would also have a malicious node. So they go together, right? You'd have a malicious node and a malicious Timelord working together. You cannot replace the foliage, right? The foliage is signed by the farmer who made the plot, the proof of space. It's all signed with their plot. So you can't take random foliage and put it on a block. That block will not validate. So you'd make a block that everybody would reject, right? Which is basically useless. So you can't just like take some foliage from somewhere else and attach it to another block. You also cannot not make transaction blocks. So the network expects transaction blocks on a certain cadence. So when it's time for one, if you don't make one, the network will also reject that block. So basically the malicious Timelord, malicious node has to make the block when it's supposed to, and it has to accept the foliage as it was given from the farmer. It doesn't have any choice in the matter. It can't do anything with it. It can't muck with it. It can't change anything. The only case where it has any kind of choice, right? So we're talking about choices, is if it got two blocks that were both candidates from two different farmers, which doesn't happen very often. Like typically each challenge gets one proof of space, but sometimes there are multiple blocks that get made. And then the Timelord does get to choose one of these blocks gets to become the transaction block, and it has to use the foliage from that block. So if there were two to pick from, it does get to pick one, but that's it. You can only have one transaction block, so it's going to have to pick one. There's no real benefit to picking one or the other because there's no way to predict. The only way it would make sense is if you could kind of choose your farmer, but there's no way to predict that your farmer is going to make the block at the right time to make a transaction block because it's all very lottery and where the proofs come in. So there's really nothing this guy can do with the foliage that makes any sense whatsoever, other than create 99% of the blocks they would create in trying to muck with it are going to be invalid, completely rejected by the network, which don't advance the chain at all. They don't become heavier at all, right? They're totally rejected.
So, but if you have two blocks to choose from, one of them will give you a greater weight, right? So if you have a competing Timelord that picks the heavier weight, like the higher quality block, that will probably, like your block will probably be be reorged out or ignored.
Yes, there are some things that you can do around being annoying, right? Like probably causing some level of reorgs. And this is what Gene in Twitter was saying, to replying to the guy from Caspa, was you can be annoying. So there's some annoying things you can do, but what you can't do is really play too many games that aren't just kind of being annoying. And a lot of the stuff you would do that was being suggested actually is not even annoying. It's just completely invalid. And we are looking into some of these annoying things too as well. Like it's ongoing research. Actually, it's quite active at the company. So we continue to look at these things regularly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Earl. I appreciate you joining us on a surprise occasion and shedding more insight into the potential foliage attack that had been discussed at nausea in Twitter there. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. And kind of on one of those annoyances, I see that Justin wants to answer one of the questions we have in Zoom here. It is, do you have an update regarding the signage point spikes, the reorgs that we farmers faced recently, shortly after the Time Lord ramp up?
Yeah, so we are currently investigating that. We cannot say for sure what the root cause of that was, but we are working on getting a root cause and RCA out for that, and then we'll do a postmortem, obviously, after we get a fix in place for it. So right now we're still investigating, but as soon as we know more, we'll be able to, share that with everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And a follow-up question to one we had earlier about the Time Lord distributions. And if they're not all sold out, Chia starts distributing them around the globe and is running them themselves. Will we still consider selling them at that point? After an initial sale period, will we open another sale period if they're not sold?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our goal is to distribute them to the community. We can keep the application period open longer. We can, there's a lot of options here. So certainly the end goal is getting them out into the hands of people who are interested in supporting and running the network and securing it forever. And so, whatever we need to do to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And segueing off that, I know we had it asked in Discord and again here on Zoom, but what is Chia's policy and ability to, say, distribute these Time Lords to Russia or other locations that there might be difficulty sending equipment to?
Yeah, I don't want to say that door is 100% closed, but obviously anyone unaware of the situation right now from EU and the United States and our allies, you're unable to ship to a couple countries, one of them being Russia, which is an unfortunate state of events, right? We're a global blockchain. We really love our Russian farmers. Thank you guys for participating. Right now, it looks like we're not going to be able to ship Time Lords to Russian participants, but we are doing, as I said, some more investigation. I just don't want to get anybody's hopes up. So far, excuse me, every stone we overturn is basically a no on that. But obviously we're staying diligent on that, and if opportunities open up, we're willing to explore them. And again, thank you to everybody inside of Russia who's participating in the network. You guys are one of our biggest countries in Europe, Eurasia. So thank you for participating and securing the network along with us.
Absolutely. And two different questions about how the Time Lords will function or how to interact with them. One being, any chance these ASIC Time Lords can be used for blue boxing? And the other one being, are docs available to run a Time Lord now, or will you be able to review the details if you're selected?
So running a Time Lord now is documented. It should be like on the wiki or on our doc site. You can go to the Time Lord page and check that out. The additional steps for running an ASIC Time Lord are, there's a piece of software that we give you that allows you to pass the proofs to the VDF on the ASIC chip. And then you just plug it in, turn that on, turn on a node, run a couple commands. Obviously, if you're selected and you'll be in a cohort of people that we're going to run through those instructions with, we'll be able to provide technical support 24/7, maybe, depends on who's up and around. But we're super engaged with helping you guys get started. And if you want to practice now, running a Time Lord on just regular non-ASIC hardware and running the instructions there is 85% of the way to doing it. And then no, these cannot be used for blue boxes. There's no software for it, and I don't believe the chips on the ASIC can do compression. I believe they just do VDF proofs.
There is documentation in the Chia VDF repository on running an ASIC Timelord. Just if
Yeah, I mean,
anyone
if
is
you want to
curious.
go look at the you want to go look at the GitHub, you just won't be able to obviously connect an ASIC to it yet, but you can do everything else.
Very much. I
Yep.
know that there's been a lot of talk in Chia, and this is obviously going to be a lot of focus on the Time Lords themselves. We've discussed how Time Lords are not given rewards throughout the system itself, and we've also discussed kind of what happens when you have the fastest Time Lord. But one thing that was only briefly mentioned is what occurs when that fastest Time Lord has something occur. What is kind of the fallback plan that occurs?
You mean if it goes down?
You got it. You got it. So if you had the fastest Time Lord and you were closest to the last peer who created a block and your Time Lord goes down and your cluster of 3 goes down, how does the network respond to that?
Right. So your unfinished block, if you also won the block, right, is distributed in the network, and some other Time Lord will pick it up and infuse it, assuming it's the winning block. So that's kind of how the redundancy works. Every Time Lord will always do its best to infuse blocks that it sees gossip on the network, and whoever is first will be the one who wins.
Yeah, all the this is Earl, I decided to jump in. All the when a farmer makes a unfinished block, so they found a proof and they gossip it out to the whole network, right? So these are all flying around, these unfinished blocks, and you aren't specifically sending it to a Time Lord, right? Like that's, well, you're just putting it out on the network, and then the Time Lord essentially gets it from the node it's connected to. So all the Time Lords are going to see these unfinished blocks, like all of them, around the same time. So that's kind of why I think in our documentation, we often say that the network only needs one honest Time Lord to run, because they all see these unfinished blocks. But I will let Justin jump in to talk about what does happen though if that Time Lord that was the fastest disappears for a little while, because there's interesting difficulty things that happen to the network, and maybe he wants to expound on
Yes.
that.
One of the reasons we want to globally distribute Time Lords and even single unit ASICs, if people don't want to run a 3-unit cluster, is that a drop in IPS from 900K to 260K would change difficulty in the network for a while. Everybody has a good grasp on this. That's just in the reverse. As we were ramping up the speed of the ASICs on the network, you were seeing changes in difficulty for 24-hour periods as the difficulty tried to catch up with the new block rate, right? Which is why you were getting more signage points. In reverse order, you would see the same thing. But you would be less signage points because the network would be trying to generate fewer blocks because the difficulty is not matching the speed anymore. So it's the difficulty and speed of block rate is managed sort of by signage points, and it is adjusted on 24-hour increments. And so in a catastrophe where every ASIC stopped existing at once, the network would probably misbehave for a couple of days as it reorged over a couple of different periods. After the first 24-hour period, it'll probably be mostly back to normal. But frankly, we've never really tested that with the space that's on mainnet. We've tested some of them on testnet. It's never good. The network never behaves well. Blocks still flow, but it is erratic, and lower end nodes would struggle because you're getting more proofs, heavier proofs maybe stacked on top of each other sometimes that are coming through all at once. It's just not a fun experience, and that's why we want to have as many globally distributed as we can to avoid you're in Stockholm and the network cuts around you for 2 minutes or something like that or whatever. We want to be have a reasonably close Time Lord peer for you to communicate with. That way if you were going to win a block, you would still win it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all for the detailed dive into what happens when a Time Lord goes offline. Really appreciate that and seeing it from all the different aspects. I've not seen any additional questions yet arise, so I'm going to go ahead and do the wrap up. If anybody does have a final question, feel free to post it in Zoom or in that Discord server. Otherwise, thank you to Justin and Arvid and Earl for jumping in, letting me put you on the spot and really drill into the questions about Time Lords. And also thank you all of the community members who took the time to participate and everybody watching this recording after the fact. We really appreciate it. And you can join us this Friday or join myself this Friday. I will have Bram Vollenbrecht on and discussing how CNI goes through security reviews and audits. So another highly technical side of everything, diving really into that security. We'll post a link for that event on Friday itself. So it'll be Friday at 7 p.m. UTC. But look forward to it all. And thank you guys for your time today. Have yourselves a wonderful one.